and welcome to another exciting show with me, Carmel Fisher, on the Harvest Podcast. Today, we are sitting down chatting with Mr. Aaron Trahan, business performance coach and professional speaker. Aaron, welcome.
Hi, Carmel. I'm glad to be here and excited for a lively discussion.
Yeah, very excited to hear more. Now, Aaron, your almost two decade long executive leadership background spans across like corporate, startup environments, and apparently you quickly scaled your leadership career, becoming a senior executive at a billion-dollar publicly traded company at the tender age of 30. Tell us more about that journey. Very intriguing start, it seems.
Yes, yeah. So, I found myself first interning with a company and then moving into a full-time role. And, this company had a very, let's just call it flat organizational structure. And even though at the time, it was a couple $100 million company, it operated much more bootstrapped than it needed to be, which was tough for a lot of people to come in from the outside and really adapt to. But that was the only environment that I knew. Started interning with the company at 18 years old. So I quickly adapted to the pace and the intensity at which the organization operated at. And the clear value add that the organization looked for was really strong levels of execution, just flat out were you able to get things done. And that opened up the opportunity for me to experience leadership at a really early age, 22, 23 years old, where I was put into my first leadership role. And, quite honestly, I'm pretty sure the leaders at the time said, let's just throw the kid in there. Let's see if he can keep things together until maybe we can find a more permanent replacement. But I knew that that was my opportunity and I really seized it, became just a student of business, how to operate. I was too young and too dumb enough to know which,
Mhm.
where the boundaries were. And so I was just bursting with enthusiasm and energy. And so I was able to knock down walls and get things done that a lot of other people couldn't. And so that's what really led me on an accelerated path, working my way up the corporate ladder to eventually assuming a senior executive position, being a member of the senior leadership team at the age of 30, now running a much larger, billion-dollar plus annual revenue run rate business. Um, so yeah, it was really drinking through the proverbial leadership fire hose and just being able
Mhm.
to apply all of those learnings, reflect on the mistakes, really understand the missteps along the way that allowed me to keep being able to execute at a high level.
And seizing every opportunity is obviously what you were doing. Now, with that, what key mindsets or strategies do you believe contributed most to your rapid career ascent?
Yeah, from a mindset perspective, I've seen a couple things, and I'll answer the question by starting first by understanding, when you really look at what happens to leaders after they reach a certain level of success, they run into a situation that's unavoidable. And that situation, or kind of what I like to refer to as the success rule, is that success is going to breed complacency. It always has, it does today, and it always will. And so, as a leader, the more successful you become, the harder it is. And this applies both on an individual leadership basis, but also too on an organizational basis. Um, the more successful you become, the harder that you have to fight to stay in growth mode, to not let the success and the achievements kind of inflate the ego that takes you out of learning mode. And it's just a natural tendency for those in leadership that, it's funny that I see this over and over again that after leaders reach a certain level of success, they develop a willingness to start listening to the things they want to hear and lose some of the willingness to listen to the things they most need to hear that would actually help them improve, develop, continue to grow, continue to, drive business success. And so, I think for me, from a mindset standpoint, the thing that I made sure to adopt, is really what I now share with leaders today. And that's when you can commit to being a lifelong learner either on an individual or organizational basis, it's going to be the sustainable, guaranteed competitive advantage that you can always give to yourself and your team. Everything's always going to be changing. There's things are going to evolve. Things will happen differently. And so the second that you get out of learning and growth mode and become a little complacent, that's almost going to be that gradual decline for any leader or business that really starts to lose the effectiveness, um, and gets in the way for continuous improvement, continuous growth. And so I think that's just one of those pillars that is going to come with continuous success is staying in that learning mode, always reflecting and figuring out how can we keep getting better, not resting on what's been achieved in the past.
Wonderfully said. Definitely the concept of continuous improvement, especially in this rapidly changing environment that we find ourselves, right, Aaron? I mean, if you're just trying to stay with the status quo, I think you do yourself a disservice, to your point. Talk to us now about how you would incorporate these mindsets into your coaching methodology and how successful is it? Do you find it's challenging? You mentioned, of course, many leaders tend to settle into some kind of complacency. It's how do you help them incorporate this into their everyday?
Sure. Yeah, and you're right. Look, I think that's the one thing that I need to preface this by saying is that a lot of what we're going to be discussing it makes sense at a conceptual level. I think there's going to be broad-based alignment here, but don't confuse it for being easy because it is extraordinarily difficult. And that is why so many leaders, to in some degree, kind of get trapped in the comfort zone. And I kind of like to think about things, we got to give credit where credit's due. And that is to the Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck, who has really brought mindset into the mainstream. I think just about any business circle or environment that or association that you're a part of, every business leader and professional is going to be somewhat aware of the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. I think that's all, really mainstream awareness that I think that concept has reached. But here's what I continue to see. Those that identified with a growth mindset, that having that internal belief that with the proper amount of time, energy, and effort, you can build new skills, you can grow your capabilities, enhance your intelligence. Nothing's fixed, anything can be grown with perseverance and effort. And what I noticed was while those people that identified with a growth mindset, they believed all the right things, they said all the right things. And you know what? If you go to their LinkedIn profiles, they're probably posting all the right things too. But the spirit of the answer to your question really lies in your bias for action. And that's where I've liked to have really created this new concept around a performance mindset. And that is what separates those from thinking and believing, yet never reaching from an individual or organizational standpoint, their full potential or playing at their highest level from those that do. And it's that those that actually achieve what they all set out to achieve is the big differentiator being a bias for action. Thinking and believing won't take you very far alone if there's not action behind it. And so the key element that I look for and those that I work with, the leaders and the businesses, is how committed are you to taking action? Are you prepared to be in a constant state of having to get comfortable being uncomfortable Because if you're not willing to go to the very outer edges of your current capability, you're not going to be able to tap into the full growth potential that's there. And I like to use the quote that I heard that I just absolutely fell in love with is the magic you are looking for is going to be in the actions that you're avoiding. We're going to have to do things differently. We're going to have to reflect. We're going to have to take risks. We're going to have to step out of our comfort zones when we don't feel like the subject matter expert, when we don't feel, totally comfortable in what we're doing and maybe not even fully qualified, right? But it's taking those actions on an individual and organizational level that gets us out of that status quo trap that allows us to tap into new growth. But the big takeaway here, I know a bit of a long-winded answer to the question. I just really want to stress the point that you can think all the great things, you can believe all the great things, you can read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, attend all the conferences. But if you don't walk away and apply the learnings through action, you're going to be in the exact same place 1 year from now than you are today. And so growth doesn't work without action.
Faith without works is dead. Um,
Yes.
Now, your approach reimagines the OKR management system. And for those who may not be aware, the OKR management system is basically based on objectives and key results. It's a goal management framework designed to execute strategy and a powerful way to formulate and track goals. Um, Now, tell us more about how you infuse this. Explain perhaps how your version differs from traditional OKR implementations and why it's particularly effective for today's business landscape.
Yeah. I'll start first by sharing the question that I like to ask every CEO that I engage with. And I
Mhm.
asked the CEO, imagine that I show up to this week's leadership meeting, staff meeting, whatever you want to call it, where the meeting at which you bring together all of your top leaders, they're all in a room, and imagine that I go around that room and secretly ask everybody there, what are the top two or three priorities for the business? And why are these the top priorities for the business right now? What would happen? Almost 9 out of 10 CEOs that I asked that to sit back, reflect, and share with me. It's very likely that you're going to get different answers from everybody in the room. And I think that speaks to the core issue that so many businesses have. When you look at any organization in any industry, in any sector of any size, when they consistently fail to meet their expectations and deliver the performance that they have set out to deliver on, the issues or the reasons why they're not able to do it will always fall into one of these three buckets, if not all three. The first one is priority mismanagement, and it goes exactly to that question that I ask every CEO. If your leadership team and those that are responsible for leading all the key divisions of the company, if that team is not aligned and not clear on what the top priorities are, it's then going to fall into the second bucket where you're going to have very fractured focus from the organization. If each leader has a different priority set and there's a lack of alignment, there is no way at which you're going to be able to effectively harness the focus of the organization to put the right dosage and level of focus behind the few priorities that matter most. And this always shows up in the third bucket where there's typically a lack of accountability and execution. And while the OKR framework is a great goal setting and management system that helps with that, there's still a lot of mistakes made in the application of the OKR framework. And so I work with businesses to really help save them from themselves, quite honestly, is an easy way to explain it, by making sure that we first draw alignment. Does everybody know what success looks like in the next 12 months? Let's get really clear on that. Can we go around the room and gain alignment? Can everybody speak off the same page of what we're trying to achieve over the next 12 months that would define success? From there, we then work backwards. If that's where we want to be in 12 months, what must we achieve? What must be true over the next 6 months for us to be on track to meet that 12-month vision? Once we get the team clear on that, we've now got some conceptual alignment that then and only then allows us to wrap the OKR system and framework into an operating structure over the next 3 months that helps us determine what are the key objectives and the supporting priorities that we must achieve over the next 3 months that gets us on track to be where we need to be in the next 6 months that will keep us on track to our 12-month vision. So that's a conceptual way of how I like to work with organizations and leadership teams, because if you can do what I just explained, even relatively well, it goes a long way in helping teams avoid the chronic mistakes that show up around prioritization, focus, and accountability that hold so many businesses back.
For sure. And, this methodology has played a prominent role in the success of global brands like Google, Intel. So there's obviously a lot of credibility within this method itself. But to your point, the implementation of that and the strong focus that you place on prioritization, focus, accountability, I think that's obviously what tends to be lacking for many companies. Conceptually, to your earlier point, people have a good understanding of concepts, of ideologies, but actually putting them into action takes some help, and that's where you come in.
Right. And I would just
Yeah.
add to that, because I think you brought up a very important point.
Hmm.
And what is the supporting benefit that companies can gain here? And it's the ability to say no or not yet to things that fall outside of this priority scope. And I think Warren Buffett has a great quote on this. And he says, what separates average companies from really, really successful companies is that the really, really successful companies say no to virtually everything. And so, what makes a great organization is their ability to understand and have clarity on what the most important priorities are, get and harness the organization to be laser focused behind those priorities, and at least over this time period of the 3 month cycle, be able to have the discipline to say no or not yet to everything else.
100%. And yet, sometimes easier said than done, right? And this is why you have very specific techniques, and we'd like to hear about those in these changing times with challenging demands and cost infractions. What what techniques have you found most effective in helping companies, leaders, to maintain their focus on these critical strategies?
Yeah, so to answer that question, I think we need to back up and understand the two biggest components that prevent organizations and companies from achieving goals. So what is it that actually makes goals fail? And I think one of those items is just not having robust systems in place that can help track and measure progress. As a matter of fact, the High Performance Institute did a study of 19,000 professionals, and they broke these professionals down in different cohorts. And what they found was pretty astounding. They found that the cohort that had a clear goal but lacked any type of tracking and measuring towards that goal performed no better than the cohort that didn't set a clear goal to begin with. And so I think that just highlights the point of how important tracking and measuring progress, at least on a weekly basis, is. And I think the second one, which I think speaks really directly to the question that you asked, is the other thing that gets in the way of organizations achieving goals is when short-term priorities become misaligned to their longer or medium-term vision. And so that exercise that I bring organizations through before we even start the implementation of the OKR framework is really going to be the glue that holds it together. Because an OKR system over a 3-month period is great, but how do we know that the things that we're prioritizing and leveraging through the OKR framework aligns with our medium and long-term vision? How do we know that our teams are aligned around what success looks like over the next 12 months? And if you don't have that, an OKR it may help you get things done, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the right things that make the biggest amount of progress and impact towards helping you move towards that goal. So I think I just want to come back and highlight that what does success look like in the next 12 months, making sure that we've got organizational alignment on that. And then what needs to be true? What must be achieved in the next 6 months to ensure that we're on track? I think that sets up for the right priorities to get the spotlight of focus and attention by way of an OKR process that also then completely minimizes the risk of that second element of short-term priorities not being aligned to medium and longer term visions, because I just can't stress how important that is for organizations, because that's where you're going to see the reactivity of a lot of organizations firefighting. And it's a very natural tendency to prioritize things that are short-term pain points when they may not be the most important things. They may not be the things that warrant the type of prioritization that's going to help the organization move to things that make the biggest impact towards that 6-month and 12-month milestone.
Yeah, makes total sense. Now, obviously, you're operating in a variety of environments from both corporate and startups. How do you tailor your coaching approaches to address obviously the unique challenges faced by leaders in these different settings?
Yeah, for the larger corporate organizations, I think where they want to be, where they want to go, how they want to position themselves, what the biggest pain points are for the business maybe a bit more clear, maybe a bit more acute. And I would say the big thing with more early stage companies is, arguably they need even more help around the prioritization and focus, simply because in some cases they're trying to find the growth strategies that allow them to be sustainable. And they may have 25 different options that they may be able to choose from to go out and acquire new revenue streams, accelerate growth, really solidify product market fit. And what I found with more early stage startup companies, having these type of systems in place are significantly more important than at the higher corporate level, where your different channels, your go-to-market strategy, your product market fit, there's much more stability there, and the business isn't as at risk, maybe like a smaller stage startup is, with kind of chasing after the shiny objects that have the allure of short-term revenue creation. So yeah, I think that's, there's a reason why 90% of startups fail. And it's because of these things that we're talking about is, can you prioritize the right things that match up with your medium and long-term strategy? And can you create and harness the organizational focus to keep the main things that prevent you from chasing after some of the other what is disguised as easy opportunities, when in reality they're just distractions. And that's where you start getting a bit more mission drift. And it's kind of like the dog chasing after the car. And so that tends to happen at a much higher frequency in early stage startups, when you're chasing after any form or channel of revenue without having that recalibration of saying, does this fully align to get us to where we need to be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? And if not, even if it's a gray area and we're trying to justify it to ourselves, are we going to have the organizational discipline to be able to say no? And the reason startup failures are so high is because more teams can't say no than having the discipline to keep the top priorities the top priorities.
Now, you speak of a 3-out high performance formula. What is that?
Yeah, over the past 20 or so years, I've been just a huge student of looking at different leaders and mentors that I look up to. And I just, maybe it's because I'm a systems thinker and I try to boil things down to different equations and tactics. But I was just very curious on why some business leaders and executives tend to plateau out after having some success versus some that continue to find new level after new level after new level. And so I've been kind of on a mission to really understand this is what is one group doing that leads to greater success that the other group is not. And throughout multiple different industries and sectors and different types of leaders, everything pointed back to these three things that were the key separators. These were the golden threads. And so that's where I kind of created the 3-out success formula. And so what did those leaders that continued to find the continuous improvements and new levels of success, what were they doing? Number one, they out-prepared everyone around them. If they got something wrong, it wasn't going to be because of preparation. They always made sure that they did their due diligence. They had a wide range of options for different types of scenarios, and they really believed in the concept of if you're not prepared for worst case scenario, then you're not really prepared. And I just continue to see this over and over and over again that they were putting in far more effort in the preparation process. They practice harder to make sure that they perform better when it was game time. I saw that over and over again. The second one was that these leaders outworked everybody around them. And I don't want this to come off as that it appears to be some hustle culture speak. I promise you, these were not leaders that walked around, citing the number of hours they worked in the week as a badge of honor, but it does speak to their level of productivity and execution. Look, we all only have 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week, and 12 months in a year. Regardless of how much money you have or status, those things are set. Those are finite time increments that we all have. What these leaders figured out how to do to make them successful was that they were just far more productive during these times, weeks, and months than everybody else. They found operating leverage. They were able to increase their output with very little change to the inputs. And it kind of comes back to what I mentioned earlier. It's all around that productivity, that execution, and the ability to get things done, to move things forward. And then lastly, I would say arguably the most important is that even after they found different levels of success and achievement, they continue to outlearn everybody around them. It doesn't matter if they were the highest paid, highest ranking person in the room. They never acted like they were the smartest one in the room. They showed up and constantly looked for ways to learn new perspectives, gain new ideas. They were much more focused on the organization making the right decision and being effective than they were their idea or their thoughts being right. And so they were lifelong learners. They were always the best students in the room. And they took to heart that message that I said earlier, being a lifelong learner was a sustainable competitive advantage. And so when you put these three things together, and your audience can even think about the people in their lives, and I'll just ask this in a question. Have you ever seen anyone out prepare, outwork, and outlearn everyone around them and not find new levels of success, I've yet to find a single example. And so that's where these golden threads kind of continue to show up in those leaders that just continue to find new levels of achievement.
What a wonderful entrance to this fantastic conversation. I have personally learned so much, and I'm sure my audience would love to hear more and learn more from you, Aaron. For those listening, where can they get a hold of you?
Sure. The two places that you can say I show up most, one's on LinkedIn. Feel free to go. Let's connect on LinkedIn. Would be happy to share insights. I do almost on a daily basis there, and so I want for those who follow and connect with me on LinkedIn for me to be a high value connection for you. So I'm very active on LinkedIn, and if you want more detail around the different type of performance programs that I offer to teams and businesses, I highly encourage you to go to my website, which is performanceMindsetCoaching.co. No M, just CO. And that's where you'll learn a little bit more about the details of my methodology, the types of different programs that I offer to organizations to help their teams work more effectively together and help the businesses execute at a higher level, as well as a lot of other information. So between those two places, I think you'll find everything you need to know around how I can help and how I add value.
Wonderful. And as a top 100 entrepreneur and innovator, you have been recognized, Aaron, for your impact on performance-driven leaders globally. So I think anyone who reaches out to you will definitely find value. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. And that's it for The Harvest, everybody. Stay tuned for more.
And you're listening to the Harvest Podcast, available anywhere you find podcasts. Stay tuned for more.